Getting a second showing on your home. You'd hope that a buyer comes through your property, and after seeing it for 5 or 10 minutes, they're ready to make an offer. And the objective is to get a second showing. A while back, my son was on a highway, and he drifted ever so slightly into somebody else's lane. And they were not going that fast, but he totaled his vehicle. He walked away from it, and their vehicle had some pretty bad damage. They rode off in an ambulance and were later okay. But I had to go out and buy a car. And so I went out and looked at by owners on something called Craigslist. And I started looking at cars, but the guy I was driving around with, the owner, would ride in the car with me, and it felt a little creepy and uncomfortable. And because of that, I'm like, I don't really understand this process. And I know real estate since the 1980s, but I don't know cars. And the process seemed odd and uncomfortable, and I just ended up going back and getting a car for my son through a dealer. And they didn't know how to do it either. The seller, the buy owner, didn't know how to do it either. So you're the matchmaker, you're the buy owner. A real key thing here is getting a second showing. And the question is, like a car, trying to buy a car from a buy owner, they want to ride in the car with you. And some of these people I did not feel comfortable with sitting in the back seat that I've never met before. And so I'm driving their car, but I just don't feel comfortable with them. So a buyer may not be comfortable with the process. They may put their happy face on chatting with you, but they may not be comfortable. So what we want to do is get a second showing. After the buyer has come through your open house or seen the property, using the log form we have for you in the forms library, there's some questions in there to get the buyer to come back for a second showing. And the objective is to let them have the house and drive it around, if you will, on their own. Let them come into the property and say, you know what, I'll leave for 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, just drive around the block, go to Starbucks, what have you, and I'll leave you to see the home. Because when I was looking at a car with my son and the owner was standing right there the whole time, I couldn't say to him, I love it, I love it, I love it, because that would show our negotiations hand. And also, I couldn't say anything negative about it because the owners would get defensive. So a buyer's in your home and they're saying nice things. We want them to actually, if there's a couple there, we want them to express themselves and to be able to say what they don't like about the property, but they could cure. What they would make changes to. But they don't want to offend people, so they don't say it in front of them. So they leave and they just kind of say, well, the process wasn't comfortable. So as the matchmaker, part of your job is to get the buyers back for a second showing and letting them know that you won't be there for 15, 20 minutes, whatever the case. It's really your comfort level. Selling by owner, there's an element of risk, and letting strangers into your property. But somebody is your buyer, and it would look like this is all going to be comfortable. We'll all go to the closing happy together, as if there was no problems on a building inspection, and there's almost always problems on inspections, and that's what pulls deals apart. Is not sometimes the amount of money on the building inspection has to be spent to remedy it, but it's how people felt about the other party during the inspection, how they didn't feel they were treated fairly, and the deal comes apart. That's a different story. Getting a buyer in for a second showing is really quite important. The hope that the buyer will buy just after one viewing, being in the house for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever the case, when they don't know the process, how to buy a home. It's easier to buy a car than a home, but in buying a home is one of the highest stresses. It's moving, death, and divorce are the three highest stresses. And so a buyer, you as a seller has the confidence to do this, but the buyer may not have the confidence. And part of your job as the matchmaker is to bring them along and really sometimes encourage that second showing. The only way to do that is making sure you have their phone number and or email address, and to be able to say, you know, hey Bob, you were in my house last Sunday at the open house. You guys sounded like you had some interest in the property, and I wanted to extend an invitation to you. If this week you had an interest in seeing the home a second time, I don't mind just greeting you there and then taking off for a little while so you can take a look at the home. Now here's what's really important about this. Sometimes that buyer will say to you, well, your home was just a little bit too far east for us, too far west, whatever. They give what's called an incurable. You can't solve that problem. Now if they say the kitchen flooring was a little bit old, well, that's curable. We can solve it by changing it out, you know, after closing or something like that. But offering the buyer a second view at your home, second appointment with you not being there, will absolutely qualify that buyer based on motivation, where sometimes they'll say to you, no, we decided to hold off buying for right now. Your home was too far west. We decided to build a home. So what happens, just by making the offer to come back for a second showing, you can eliminate people you thought were candidates. Because after all, you're just trying to find the one buyer, and the thing is, you don't want is false hope. You want to know the truth and the reality, and the way to do that is really to ask the questions, would you like a second showing on the home? And that is a very fast way to find out if you're talking to a rabbit or a turtle. All right, thanks for watching.